I'm honored to be on a panel with Dr. Contra. I read his work but never met him. Köszönjük szépen, hogy velünk tartott. Dr. Contra mentioned the melting pot. I want to show you a pot that keeps the stew from morphing into a tasteless mush. Instead, it maintains the taste of each separate ingredient. I would say from his hypothesis, it's about 94% true, but I'm going to talk about the 6% that can prove part of his hypothesis wrong. So let's take a look at the case study of Cleveland, Ohio, and a little bit, the overall question that I'm looking to answer is, if only 5 to 7% of those reporting Hungarian ancestry speak the language in their household, then what are the factors that influence their language maintenance? So how can a community maintain language into the second and third generation? So, of course, my big fat Hungarian wedding, I'm a member of the Cleveland Hungarian community. I was born and raised there. This is kind of a misnomer. My wedding wasn't in Cleveland, it was actually in Philadelphia, but it was big, it was fat, and it was Cleveland. About half the people were from Cleveland. And you see all those, what the guys are wearing, Palóc, Népiselet, it's hand embroidered in Cleveland by parents of the Hungarian Scout Folk Ensemble. I was born and raised here. I'm the second generation son of Hungarian immigrants from 1956. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about this umbrella society, which encompasses 8 Hungarian churches and 15 civic organizations. My presentation will be about half of a kind of a sociological background of the community, and then half will go into the factors here. So the theoretical framework, okay, we've probably heard of Urban and Orby, right? Kind of this communication theory of identity, how it builds and sustains. I prefer kind of this spiritual homeland theory as voiced by our honorary consul Laszlo Böjtös. It used to be these ethnic neighborhoods, like in Cleveland, the Buckeye neighborhood, or in South Bend, or Chicago, Buffalo, Youngstown, wherever. But now they've shifted from geographical to purely social entities. And I'm not talking about virtual, I'm talking about getting together on the weekend for a Hungarian event. We may be familiar with the continuum of assimilation. Okay, on the left-hand side, you have this complete melting pot Americanization. Then we have this symbolic ethnicity, kind of like the Irish and the Italians on St. Patrick's Day or on Columbus Day. The first generation would be right in the middle, segmented assimilation, where we maintain solidarity. I think I'm in the second generation, biculturalism, where I retain my sense of Hungarian identity, but I also am completely integrated into American society. Cleveland was not the American Debrecen. It was not second only to Budapest, although that has appeared a lot. It was actually like number 7, but there was still a huge number of Hungarians that live in Cleveland. We've got the old timers, Öreg Amerikások, or Óamerikások, as we refer to them, the DPs, the 56ers, then economic refugees, and then the brain drain of today. There are other cities that have significant Hungarian populations. These are not the latest census statistics, but one before, so 2010. And you can see the percentages, Hungarian ancestry versus speaking the language in the household. It's about 6%. Some cities it's larger, some cities it's smaller, but the rule of thumb in North America is generally about 6% speak the language at home of people who say they are of Hungarian ancestry. In Cleveland, that number holds true as well. We've got about 4,500 people who speak Hungarian at home. And this is just of Cuyahoga County and its surrounding counties. And these numbers have changed over the years as well. So what does it really mean to be Hungarian in Cleveland? All right, I'm going to express language, culture, and traditions. Those are the 3 general areas. Let's talk about traditions here. In the wintertime, we have kolbásztöltés, making sausage, okay, still going on, sometimes in a church basement. We have Mikulás, okay, not the télapó of current Hungarian, but kind of a tradition from the DPs. Betlehemezés, that's the nativity play. This is a picture from the mid 1970s. Okay, that's yours truly wearing the purple cape when I was in my teens. That was probably in the 1980s. And then two of those kids are my sons. That's in the 2000s. The tradition is passed on from generation to generation. The Scouts are who maintain this particular tradition. Debutante balls from the 1960s. You can see what the ladies are wearing there. Dísz magyar. This is from the 2000s. This is a fairly recent picture. The guy in the middle is actually the current scoutmaster of the Hungarian Scout Troop in Cleveland. These are recent pictures. This is still a tradition that's maintained in Cleveland. Goes on a couple times a year. Springtime, we have our March 15th commemoration. I just had it not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. It attracts all a diversity of membership. We also have this locsolás, Easter locsolás. You can see sometimes around Easter time, yeah, we do get snow in Cleveland. Summertime, Hungarian cultural gardens are a big deal in Cleveland. It's very old. It's from 1930s, and still we hold a festival there. You see the St. Elizabeth dance group. Then we have a park out about an hour from 45 minutes from Cleveland with, I would call it gastronomic Hungarian identity. You know, you have your gulyás, lángos. This is the same in many North American Hungarian cities. The Scouts are very active in all throughout the summer. We have fall traditions. Okay, the biggest being the Hungarian Scout Festival. It's been going on for 65 some years. Gastronomic, but also a chance for social identity and Hungarian folk dance and people to meet each other. Harvest festivals in the fall. This is an old picture from St. Elizabeth Church, the Reformed Church. This is a current picture. You can see the dance groups are involved. The other parts of our culture, we've got about 400 people who attend Hungarian church services from in 8 different denominations. We've got about 2,000 on mailing lists and about 50 Hungarian funerals every year. Church services, that's kind of the numbers breakdown of how many people would attend on an average Sunday or Saturday. We've got a number of different organizations. The ones that are bold-faced have a physical location. And you can see the numbers in red on the right. Our Hungarian school, we have about 50 to 60 students. We have 3 Hungarian schools, and there's about 90 young people who, in the Hungarian language, maintain a scouting troop every single Friday. And then there's a dance group, which has about 25 members. Székely Kapu in Hiram in the park. This is a picture of the Hungarian school. This is what a Hungarian school Monday looks like, okay, where parent volunteers teach the language. You can see the Scouts, okay, the dance group. We also have a couple of Hungarian butchers. We have 5 different pastry shops. Now let's talk about language. A lot of Hungarian books. I would say the Cleveland Hungarian Heritage Society's library has the best emigre collection. We do have Hungarian publishing that happens 2 to 3 times a year or almost bi-monthly, that is in the Hungarian language. We've got 3 different radio programs. Cleveland State, this conference, we have a number. So let's talk to let's shift gears and move to the actual relationship of Hungarians to their language. So what role does the community play in this all? I did a language case study with 18 participants, extended interviews. What I did is had 6 groups of 3, which would allow them to agree or disagree with each other and kind of spawn new insights. One of the groups had 3 siblings, each with children of their own. So they went through the whole Cleveland Hungarian experience on their own, and then also went through it with their own children. So the 2nd and 3rd generation. So they gave some really interesting insights. I also included teenagers and some older participants, and I was trying to get a deeper understanding of the factors that influence why. The question was, why do the 6%? How are they able to maintain their language identity? as opposed to the 94% who don't. You can see from the number of people here, most of them grew up, or all of them grew up in Cleveland, or most of them rather. And then for many of them, both of their parents were also born and grew up here in the Cleveland area. And you can see a lot of them were in the scouting community, which I think is important in cities like New Brunswick, Toronto, San Francisco, and especially Cleveland. So here are just some of the interviewees, okay, at the time of their interviews. They've since grown up. That's the family members. I chose this family because some have, or two of the three have American spouses, and some of the kids do speak Hungarian, some of their kids don't speak Hungarian, but they all grew up here in Cleveland. All right, so the influencing factors, kind of what came out of this was the importance of parenting, peers, and that's the first two are the most important. So parenting is the most important, but when someone reaches the teenage years, then the peers and community become very important, and that is what takes precedent, right? Anyone who's got a teenager knows that suddenly when they reach age 13 or thereabouts, suddenly the parents are the horrible, worst, evil people in the world. And then hopefully in their 20s, they realize that their parents are not so stupid after all. But to bridge that problematic age group, if you have a community in place, that's what helps you to bridge that gap. All right, so let's talk about the importance of parenting. Carl was one of my interviewees. They were not allowed to speak English, and it wasn't a punishment or threat thing. It was more respect, that dad was very proud of where he came from, and it was just expected. It was just the expectation. Christina Tabor also tried to foster an atmosphere. She was born and raised in Cleveland, and then now she has children and grandchildren of her own. And then the family dynamic changes as American spouses are introduced into the family dynamic, but it's always trying to encourage without being punitive. And it is an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing struggle that second generation parents struggle with. It's not easy. What happens is when you're first, you're still in the family, then there's less English impact. And then when the youngest starts coming home from preschool, suddenly he can speak English. And then at first the kids speak Hungarian amongst themselves, but as English becomes easier and easier, then the language switches. Right? And I noticed that on my own family as well, where my children would switch over, I would switch over with my peers, and then it's in the community that you are somewhat forced to speak the language, or you have an opportunity to speak the language. But the switch happens when the children reach school, and especially at age 10, when the school subjects start to become difficult, where suddenly the konyhanyelv, the basic Hungarian that the family has been speaking, is not enough to try to explain algebra. So American spouses can play a very important role because this is a really interesting, Dave would say, hey, let's say, Yoshi, go bring me the piros labda. And Dave didn't speak Hungarian at all, but he would support his wife in helping them. And Zsuzsi would get frustrated with the situation. But it was basically spousal communication. And then you have to take a time out, and then they have to communicate what's going on. And one thing that Dave said, which was very interesting, was, what are they saying? What are they saying? And Zsuzsi said nothing. They're just babbling. But for Dave, it was everything, because it was his children's first words. And he couldn't understand them because in a different language. But he was really supportive, even though it was a little frustrating. He was very supportive and helpful, and that makes a huge difference. So the attitude of the American spouse can make a huge difference as to whether the second or third generation continues to speak the language or not. And then when you become a parent and you've gone through this, then suddenly you realize what's going on. And this was Susan, no, I'm sorry, this was Anne. Anne was talking about keeping her son in the program, and he was fighting her. I don't want to go there. There's requirements there. And then she stuck with it. And meanwhile, he's in the third generation, and he thanked her, and he was really appreciative. And now he's a really serious contributing member of the community. In the third generation, I have to add. So Anne was born and raised in Cleveland, and her son Pishti was born and raised in Cleveland. So peers and community, right? That's what really matters here. You can see the Scouts have a kind of a tiered leadership system with teenagers and young adults leading the younger children. So the main advantage to going to Hungarian school, going to a church, or being involved in Scouts or a dance group is that your parents are not the weird ones who speak a different language as opposed to all your other American peers, okay? You have friends, and you guys all suffer through Hungarian school together, and you don't want to go to 2 more hours of Hungarian school after having been in American school all day. But because your friends are there, it's not a burden, it's enjoyable, okay? And being out in the camps just really solidifies those friendships. And especially being in the outdoors in the wilderness in the Scouts, what the Scouts have going for them is you have to work together, and that camaraderie, that's what strengthens the relationships, and then it's the relationships that allow the language to keep going there. One of the parents, who was actually born in Budapest, but she married a Cleveland Hungarian, and she all of her children are involved in the Hungarian school and scouting, is that it gives them reasons because they know there are other kids, okay? And it's also, especially when they get to high school and they start learning Spanish, and they realize, wow, I'm very fluent in Hungarian. So there's an emotional bond that happens, okay, because of all that. And this is Carl's quote, where he came back to the interview after spending 20 years not in the community. His children had some speech difficulties, and so he ended up, his children did not speak Hungarian, but for him it was just an amazing, it touched an emotional chord, and he's seeing that the Scouts are still on, kind of disproving Dr. Konta's hypothesis, but only for the 6%. So the values, okay, some of my interviewees mentioned that realizing that other people speak it, okay, this idea of being able to communicate, and it's a gift that you can give. So why would you deny that, as opposed to trying to fit in and melt into the American melting pot. Andrew Duna and Sophie Dunay, who were cousins, actually, how it helped them with their language studies. And then Emesha, who's interesting, her wedding is coming up this summer. She's now living in Iowa, but she was born and raised in the Cleveland area. We all have to make a sacrifice to make sure that our children are able to learn. And asking the teenagers to make a sacrifice, as in to speak Hungarian to these younger 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds, that's the strength of scouting, is that it requires them to make a slight sacrifice. And then it's this whole community coming together to help the younger members is able to maintain and pass on the language to the next generation. Ties to culture as identity. I asked each recipient whether they consider themselves American or Hungarian, and got a variety of answers, but here was the most nuanced one, where, and I really identify with this as well, because I consider myself 100% American and 100% Hungarian as well. Being able to see both sides, and I think that's a positive, to be able to bridge the gap between the two cultures and languages and generations. The catch-22 is, the stronger the expectations, the stronger the group solidarity, but then that also relegates the 94% to being outside of the group. So if you don't have the language, you can't be in the in crowd. And that's this is true in any group situation. Other people say that's a problem that the Scouts have, because they have these expectations and they do not allow people in who do not speak the language. However, keeping the language, the way to keep that is by maintaining the high expectations. So the overall question, only 6% of Hungarian Americans speak Hungarian at home. Why? Or why are those 6% able? It's strong parenting and peer friendships that's put into place and enabled by a tight-knit community. So when the parent says, "Hi, Jancsi, how is magyar iskola?" Of course, the Hungarian teacher rips their hair out, because why am I volunteering and helping out when they're not going to speak Hungarian at home? But in communities like Cleveland, the assimilation odds can be beat. I'm in the second generation, my own children are third generation, and we're not unique in the Cleveland area. It does depend on strong parenting and peer friendships. So if you want to know more, there's my shout outs to, there's a book, Being Hungarian in Cleveland, which has an extended version of this presentation as well. Thank you very much.